switch to gamma for this? So I would like to, yes.
Quick question. Could you explain to us what the difference is if you have a lot of alpha waves or not?
That's a great. So there are 5 main frequencies for brain waves. Maybe you're welcome to jump in. So a lot you hear alpha a lot because, for example, people that meditate, they're very experienced at meditating. They can very quickly entrain their brain to go into the alpha zone, which is kind of the relaxed but awake and mindful zone. So then going above a little bit faster than alpha is beta. So alertness, not quite agitation yet, but you know, a little bit more nervous energy.
Right.
And then going up to gamma. But gamma is critical if we're looking at, for example, dementia cohorts, Alzheimer's patients. There are, has anybody read the paper that, or there are a lot of these products coming out that target specifically using 40 hertz stimuli to, because there was a study coming out of that's between. I actually think it's between the low E and the E flat. So it's not a particularly pleasant form of intervention. So they started. It was an animal murine model, mouse model study, and they found that it helped remove some of the amyloid plaques in the. It was very powerful. But then they're reproducing it. It's very commercialized now. They're reproducing it in I think it's phase 3 or maybe even phase 4 trials now. But the downside of that is, as you can imagine, nobody wants to sit in front of a computer screen and be exposed for a whole hour to something that's not particularly pleasant. So we're trying to see if certain type of music may have a similar impact on well-being, or you can overlay that particular frequency with something more enjoyable, like music, and may achieve similar effects without the more torturous. And you have to do that every day for 15 minutes. They're also testing it not just acoustic, but also visual stimuli at that frequency as well.
Was that E flat D? Is that?
That was a low E and E flat. Yeah. So now, before we start the Rachmaninoff, and I just want to recite a poem. Very good at this. This is there are 4 relatively programmatic movements in this Rachmaninoff. And the first one is called the gondola song. Okay, sure. An oh cool evening wave lapped gently under the oars of the gondola. That sound again, and again the sound of the guitar. In the distance, now melancholy, now happy, was heard the sound of the old barcarolle. The gondola glides through the water, and time flies through love. The waters become smooth again, and passion will rise no more.
second is by Byron. Night, love. And there's a dot, dot, dot. Night, dot. It is the hour when from the boughs the nightingale's high note is heard. It is the hour when lovers' vows seem sweet in every whispered word, and gentle winds and waters near make music to the lonely ear.
like tears. Human tears, oh human tears. You flow both early and late. You flow unknown, you flow unseen, inexhaustible, innumerable. You flow like torrents of rain in the depth of an autumn night.
Easter. The mighty peal rang out over the earth, and all the air, moaning, thundered and groaned. Melodious, silver thunderings told the news of holy triumph.
Avoid using, for example, the last movement for any of our intraoperative studies. I'll get fired. And I was just talking before to a surgeon about some clinicians when they give talks, they're not aware music played in the operating has profound effect on patients. Even when patients are under general anesthesia, their body are impacted by acoustic stimuli. And we have several surgeons in the room tonight. So there was one study that found, for example, very activating music, something similar to that, I think death metal or Skrillex or Rachmaninoff. Well, some Rachmaninoff, like very beautiful.
Yeah.
But or AC/DC, for example. So lots of different things, just very active. That may be very great for if you're having long surgery, for fatigue for the surgeon side. But it's important to balance, for example, the patient outcomes safety. It's an OR safety issue. So I usually show some of these studies a lot.
But that's underscoring that it's particular musical characteristics that have these specific effects.
It's not the genre.
Not, the popular idea that Mozart has an effect is somewhat
right. So we were just discussing scientifically. That's what we're trying to tease out. It's the composition elements. So previously, I wrote up a study. So we're assessing 16 composition elements. Some are very, very well discussed in the literature, like tempo or timbre, right? Whether instrumentation. But some items are accentuation or even articulation, those things are not really articulated in the existing literature. And the goal is to have a reproducible and scalable framework, depending on the outcome, and then also integrating AI and having biofeedback in real time. Because the limitation now is we have to look at the data later. We're seeing the mapping part before the visualization, but we're not really giving back in the real moment for the patient, right? So with the existing technology, even we could do a lot more. And also to integrate patient preference, music preference when they're admitted into the hospital. So I really believe this kind of information should be in my chart, for example, when a patient is admitted. And the whole care team should be familiar with, if somebody loves country, you shouldn't be playing death metal for them, for example. And it's really preference plays a big role. And in the events, let's say we have a mechanically ventilated patient or even palliative care. So in some cases we're obtaining verbal, kind of what do you like, or even opinion history with a music therapist may not be feasible. In those cases, some of the classical music, instrumental music, they've shown zero side effects in clinical studies, especially with, I use example, for example, the slow movement or many other things like on Chopin Nocturne, the aria from the Goldberg variations. There is a myriad of compositions we can adapt, and that's what we record. We usually take out the big climaxes in the piece, and maybe we'll even modulate repeats a little bit to make the time frame suitable for the clinical studies. So, and the other thing I want to highlight was emotional diversity you experience through just this 25-minute long piece. It's very different from experiencing, most other genres of music, right? We're told to feel a certain way, like a song through Miley Cyrus Flowers, or something. It's usually singular, and most you get two emotions, right? Something contrasting. But the magic about classical music is, on a given day, we all experience a lot of gray areas, right? Could be having a good moment at home, but at work it could be not so great. But being able to tap into, kind of really lock into the gray areas in the human emotional spectrum is what I would say marks the biggest difference in a classical composition compared to a typical pop or other type of sound. And in a lot of teenage mental health studies, they look at why they like to listen to very angry music, right? Even they're already very angry, some of them. But actually, it's the feeling of being understood, even through passive listening. They feel like their parents don't understand them. I have my kids at 6 and 9. I'm dreading that day. But it's a feeling of empathy through, and the social aspect too. Even when you don't have friends around, the music kind of makes you feel embraced emotionally, and you feel a little less lonely as well. So classical music is uniquely positioned, I feel, because of the wide range of emotions. We can each find something, a little moment to kind of tap into, and it's less isolating and less specific in a way. So I don't know if you have anything to add to it. Yeah.
No. Maybe we can.
I think you did really well. But thinking about what's the grammar of brain activity, right? How we can translate this grammar, and because we know a lot of music, so we know very little about brain, right? And so it's really important. I really thank you for the opportunity to work together. It takes it takes a lot of time to prepare, and we have a problem with projector. You never know, right? So this is live, and if you were to play this tomorrow, it's going to be slightly different because the context is important. It's why important to conduct
this is not a clinical trial. This is a research study.
The research study, right?
For our clinical trials, each of the intervention is identical.
Right.
We implement it in an identical way. We have one that's looking at difference between live music and recorded music, and no other cancer center in the world has looked at it in pre-surgical patients, pre-operative cancer patients. And the simulated live music is played through a stereo, and we have a beautiful one in the hospital. So it plays pre-recorded music, but acoustics emulates the immersive acoustics of a live performance. So it keeps it scientifically very clean while allowing us to assess potential differences between the two methods of delivery. So that's I'm really excited about that. It's 132 patients.
I have a question. So I'm not a musician, but you mentioned something that Mei at some point was improvising something.
He was too, yeah.
Being creative. So do you, I think it's important to know that and annotate that into the recordings, right? Because when you are being creative and you're improvising, your brainwaves are gonna be different than if you're just playing something that you have rehearsed and you're just playing. So do you guys make any effort of communicating with the
Absolutely,
Yeah.
with the
Yes.
team and telling them, this part was improvising or this part was just playing, like a regular
You probably see,
play?
in me, at least personally, you'll see more in the stress pathways, and rather than going on autopilot, like
Mhm.
especially in the fast movement, most of the experienced
Like,
performers, it's a very localized activation. When we play a very technical piece, actually the brain is super efficient versus an emotional piece that may look a lot easier. So before I did, we collected fMRI data. Also I was in the 7 Tesla for multiple sessions for collectively 6-7 hours just to tease out some hypotheses. And, but the technical part that may look very impressive to the audience actually require a lot less engagement on the brain. It's mostly in the motor and a little bit in the frontal. But the lyrical movement that may look like nothing's not, but emotionally, it's very global activation. Every network is
Engaged.
engaged. So the whole brain lights up for something that seemingly looks very easy technically.
I was explaining to somebody in the audience that you're a highly skilled performers, right? So you have a pattern, refined pattern of cortical activity. But of course, there are variations and emotions, different type of music. But we have been recording now several performances, right? So we can compare.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you a question because the composers obviously they know unconsciously how to do this in the sense of so they introduce the piece and then they keep you active, listening to it, and then they bring you up to a climax, right? So,
Especially Rachmaninoff.
yes.
Yes.
And it was clear at the beginning because it started builds up and then you end with talk with everything. Now I was thinking that you were mentioning that some of these pieces, what you are doing is you are cutting the pieces that they are more interesting for whatever effect it is. So have you looked at something like minimalistic music or
Very
tubular
good.
bells?
So in a way, the last movement is almost minimalistic. You heard a lot of recurrent pattern. It could be like we're talking about John Adams, some other more contemporary
You
music.
have a lot of rhythm, right?
A lot of, but it's actually more also
Yeah, but that-
repetitive as
But
well.
that's such a great point that it would be good, probably for these purposes of capturing a mood.
And
or-
ethnomusical, world different
Yeah.
cultures, and you've been to Bali recently,
Yeah, right,
looking
very
at
different.
collecting data on the Balinese music.
It would be good to have non-teleological music, non-goal-oriented music, so that there's.
I feel a lot of the knowledge gap that's in the non-Western.
Yeah, exactly.
But for example, going to my cultural heritage, the Chinese pentatonic music, there's so much history for using that type of music. The 5 tones, instead of having Western scale, we have Chinese we have 5 of the 7 notes, and each of the tones corresponds to if you do a yoga or energy point in the body, different organs. So historically in the Indian classical music as well, so the musical healing goes way back into the beginning of human time. But the field of music medicine is actually recognized even now by NIH as a separate research area, separate from music therapy. So music medicine is much more quantitative, and it's research based, and it looks really the effects of the music itself. It kind of removes the human interaction. Because with music therapy, we don't know, how much of it was the patient loves the music therapist, where they love their rapport, right, the personal relationship, and how much of it is actually from the acoustic stimulation. But with music medicine, we're purely looking at the type of acoustic stimulation, and also using very quantitative tools, proteomics, metabolomics, and all the neuroimaging tools we can have. So it's scientifically in a way much more rigorous, I would say.
Yeah, we're looking at more of the neuromodulation, right?
Yeah, and mechanisms, I would say. So more on a lot of music therapy started on more qualitative side. So I have a wonderful collaborator, he's not here, but he's a neuropsychologist. We also, of course, we have that side looking at hope, on how the patients feel, on the emotional spectrum as well. But just to make the field much more rigorous, we need more data on the quantitative side.
Metrics.
Looking forward.
Well, should we continue to answer questions and things over some bites and yeah.
I just like to.
Aaron has one more. Aaron, yes.
So
Aaron is wonderful
is
pianist.
the ultimate goal is for a doctor to write a prescription that you need this before the surgery? Is that the goal?
To be, and to make it reproducible and evidence-based, because there's so much bias in music selection in the published literature right now. For example, the Mozart, I would say 90% of studies that chose it is because their predecessors have chosen that piece. And usually the study don't have musical experts on the study team. So it makes a big difference to have the the rationale and the theoretical framework explained. So even the study team that may not have a professional musician on the team, they may be able to harness the music.
And now, whenever you have a long surgery, who decides the music?
You should advocate for yourself. Like when I have a little operation, I have a playlist. When I deliver my children, I think if the doctor will honor you, but you have to ask.
I just had a 9-hour surgery. They didn't ask me what kind of music.
You put your phone on the, you can bring a Bluetooth speaker, and I think I would, self-advocate.
Yeah.
Because knowing how much of an effect it has on your body. You may need less medication for high blood pressure, because during surgery the goal is to keep your blood pressure very low. So you're listening to, depending on what the surgeon is listening to, it may change the dosage for your anesthetic, for your sedatives.
Next time.
I just would like to recognize our students. You know, we have Leanne, Josh.
Thank you so much. Mara. Thank you again. And last thing, I want to enjoy, if you're not from MD Anderson, I want to encourage you to come attend our in-hospital concerts. We had over a dozen Grammy-winning musicians and ensembles that came through inside the #1 cancer hospital to perform. And many of them engaged data collections. And we have a new study that assesses musician performance anxiety and surgeon occupational stress. It's a clinical trial, and it's opening right now. So that's very exciting. So we were looking at changes in salivary cortisol among other parameters before, during, and after a live performance. So I think